Much more so than any of the other big four American sports, and perhaps more than any other sport on the planet, basketball is inherently artistic. The sport can often produce poetry on the court, which can come in the form of perfectly synergistic team basketball, as 5 individuals merge as one perfectly connected, flowing unit, but its beauty can also be highly individualistic. We love one-on-one play. It's tangible as a pure mano-a-mano battle, and it's hugely significant in basketball culture because many of us fans will play more one-on-one on blacktops and in driveways in our lifetimes than we ever do organized official games of 5-on-5. And, of course, it's also just mesmerizing to watch the most skilled one-on-one scorers go to work. There's a unique creative freedom in the sheer number of things they can imagine, much less pull off, with the ball on a string, the perfectly rhythmic dribble combinations, the footwork, balance, and coordination required to create just a sliver of separation from a defender, to then nail a picturesque fadeaway or step back from an incomprehensible angle or distance. There's nothing else quite like it in sports. It's incredibly easy to fall in love with, and we, as basketball fans, are highly emotional creatures. Not every 2-point basket feels the same to us. Some bring us to our feet, and some we just kind of shrug at. But they do all ultimately count the same on the scoreboard. This presents one of the major challenges that many of us fans face in our basketball analysis: the struggle to disentangle our feelings about the beauty of the art that we're watching from the objective reality of effectiveness and impact in what is ultimately more of a science. After all, basketball is not an art form like painting, where there's no such thing as an objective outcome. In basketball, there is a very clear binary objective for each team: to win. And the goal of each player should be to positively impact his team's chance at winning as much as possible. The ways in which a player can create that impact are innumerable and often decidedly unsexy. Great screening, elite rim deterrence, the ability to get to the free throw line at a high volume, which is usually the most efficient way to score, but perhaps the least appealing to a viewer. These are, of course, just a few examples of the countless assets a basketball player can bring to the table to help his team win, but they aren't all given commensurate value by fans. Take, for example, the way many fans discuss Rudy Gobert, one of the most disliked players of the modern age who was single-handedly responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet his greatest sin, to most basketball fans, is that he was born with bricks for hands and is basically uncoordinated and unskilled on offense. And yet, he is one of the greatest defenders we've ever seen. 7'1" with a mind-blowing 7'9" wingspan, pairing outstanding physical tools with a genius defensive IQ and pristine technique, making him the most effective rim protector and deterrent of the last decade. That all-time great rim protection value, paired with his elite defensive rebounding, strong post defense, and underrated schematic versatility, has made Gobert so impactful on the defensive end that his teams have been 7 points per 100 possessions better overall with him on the floor throughout his career. A very large number over a very large sample size. That huge margin exists almost entirely because of a massive difference in his team's defensive performance. The offense is basically a wash. Gobert provides positive value in some areas with elite screening and offensive rebounding and efficient play finishing, but is nevertheless very limited. But in spite of his glaring offensive limitations, Gobert has delivered star-level impact for a decade. Some give him his due credit for that, but others deride him as a bum, even going so far as to try to diminish his defense, like this ongoing narrative that Gobert cannot defend in space and gets played off the floor because of it, It's just not true, and you need look no further for proof than his playoff series against the Lakers this very season, when Minnesota deployed a switch-heavy scheme and repeatedly left him to guard LA's best perimeter players on an island to great effect, stagnating the Lakers' offense as Gobert held the big three of LeBron, Luka, and Reeves to under 33% combined shooting when he was their primary defender. Gobert has had significant playoff issues in certain matchups, but they've all been about his offense. His defense is consistently exceptional. But I believe the reason so many people try to downplay even Gobert's defense is because they loathe watching him with the ball so much, so loathe his lack of skill on offense that they cannot accept his status as an all-time great defender. They cannot fathom that he is nevertheless a very good NBA player. Because Gobert, despite being French, is not an artist. He's just about the furthest thing from it. But he was given tremendous physical tools and possesses the technique and IQ to tremendously impact the game in what many viewers would consider the most boring way possible, which leads to his value being badly underrated by many fans. Contrast Gobert's story to Kyrie Irving, the ultimate aesthetics darling, perhaps the greatest ball handler the game has ever seen, an elite shooter with masterful footwork and balance and creativity with the ball, the man with a bag that makes any basketball fan's mouth water and eyes widen. And there is no question that Kyrie is an excellent NBA player, an extremely versatile scorer, highly effective both on and off ball, and rather efficient for a guard. Plus, he keeps his turnovers low, so he's an excellent offensive player to fit well alongside many other stars. But Kyrie also has his significant limitations. He's always been a mediocre playmaker. He's a mediocre defender. And despite his dazzling finishing skill below the rim, he's never been able to impose himself physically to get to the rim with great volume, where scoring is more efficient and one can collapse the defense to create playmaking opportunities. Nor has he gotten to the free throw line at a high rate or generated three-pointers at a massive volume, which would be two more paths to very efficient offense. So while he wows us all with his otherworldly difficult shot making, Kyrie's impact in many of the unsexy aspects of the game is somewhat lacking, and he doesn't often create easy scoring opportunities for himself or teammates. Accordingly, Kyrie's impact has never stood in the same hollowed ground as his aesthetics. He's improved his teams by a good, not great 3.9 points per 100 possessions in his career, and his teams have consistently posted mediocre results when relying on him as the leading man, due to his aforementioned limitations. As you can see, when Kyrie was a teammate of both LeBron and KD, they were able to lead their teams to almost identical net ratings without Kyrie as they were with him, while the team's net rating plummeted when Kyrie was asked to play without either of them. So again, in no way do I mean to suggest that Kyrie is not a great NBA player, but he is much greater as an artist in the field of basketball aesthetics than he is in the science of basketball impact. And again, it's that impact towards winning that is the objective of the sport. And therefore, it is the aesthetics of his game that elevate him into conversations he does not belong in. Take, for example, the popular debate this summer of Kyrie versus Chris Paul. This is a legitimately contentious topic, but it shouldn't be at all. I already made a full TikTok on this topic that you can check out, so I'm going to condense the whole breakdown here. But basically, Chris Paul was the driving force for numerous all-time great offenses and elite teams across totally different circumstances for more than a decade, consistently delivering the value of a top 5 player in the NBA. Whereas whenever Kyrie has been left as the guy without his number one alongside him, he has never been an engine like that, and therefore he's very rarely been the best player on a team. Chris Paul was an all-time great playmaker, while Kyrie is mediocre there. Chris Paul was a high-impact defender, while Kyrie is mediocre there. And Chris Paul's on-off splits reflect all-time great impact on team performance, putting him behind only the likes of Jokic, KG, LeBron, and Steph this century, while Kyrie's are again good, not great. So with all this laid out there, it would have to seem that if there's any case for Kyrie as the better player, it must rest entirely on a massive edge as a scorer. But these are their career playoff scoring numbers through Chris Paul's age 35 season. A slight edge in volume for Kyrie, a clear efficiency edge for Chris Paul. Overall, very similar. There is clearly no solid argument that Kyrie has been the better, more impactful overall player than Chris Paul. It's not even close. But a lot of fans just prefer Kyrie's style as a scorer. So this is where people want to make the conversation about who was nicer or tougher, which are essentially terms about aesthetics or perceived scoring skill, not effectiveness or impact. Without that changing of the conversation or some disastrous point about how Kyrie has a ring and Chris Paul doesn't, which is the absolute worst kind of oversimplification, but we don't have time to get into the evils of ring culture today, there's literally nothing to stand on for the Kyrie side of the debate. But because Kyrie is such a tough bucket, such an artist, he will always have a cult-like following overrating him. Because we love a tough bucket. We love it when the points come hard, when they require some next level craftiness or difficult shot making to somehow get those points on the board. It's just awe-inspiring. But again, the points count the same regardless of how you get them. That is not to downplay the importance of difficult shot making. The ability to make jump shots against contests from all over the floor with different footwork and counters is very valuable, especially because you can often get to those same shots consistently, even against high-level, tight defenses. That difficult shot-making skill and versatility, for example, is a big reason that Kobe Bryant was able to increase his scoring volume and even slightly improve his efficiency in the playoffs compared to the regular season from 2008 to 2010. That's a rare feat. No, they weren't the most efficient shots, but no defense could keep him from getting to them, and that made his scoring extremely resilient. But still, it is largely because of the aesthetic mystique that comes with those shots, the unparalleled balance, footwork, craft, and tough shot making, that some people significantly overrate Kobe and argue he was a top 3 to 5 player of all time. Because although Kobe could live off the tough stuff in a wildly impressive way, other all-time greats simply created far more advantages. They created much more easy stuff. And generally speaking, it is just better to be able to consistently create easy stuff than harder stuff. Like if you're Shaq and you can bury your opponent under the basket at will basically every possession, or otherwise eat up double and triple teams deep in the paint as they desperately try to prevent you from doing so, which then creates wide open shots for your teammates, that's just better. You can create very high percentage opportunities at will over and over. Or if you're prime LeBron and you can explode past or go through or finish over any defender on the way to the rim, and you are also an elite passer who can consistently manufacture wide open shots for your teammates as the defense collapses on you, that's just better. Or if you're Steph Curry and you can spray with elite efficiency from anywhere beyond the three-point line, or pull multiple defenders way out from the basket just because you are a threat to do so on or off ball, which creates wide open shots for your teammates, that's also just better. These are the benefits of all-time outlier physical advantages, or in Steph's case, being the ultimate master of a shot that is simply mathematically weighted to be more valuable. Perhaps there is a lack of poetry in that, but it is the reality. Of course, every great player still does need counters, no matter how great their A-plus trait is, and all of these players had those too. Shaq's paint, touch, and passing were underrated. LeBron paired his all-time great downhill force with very solid jump shooting and underrated scoring craft, and peak Steph was also an absurdly efficient mid-range shooter, underratedly great finishing guard, and all-time great ball handler. And if we're ranking the superpowers at the core of all of their games, I would take any of those guys' unmatched advantage creation abilities to manufacture hyper-efficient offense over Kobe's ability to get to a 40 to 45% mid-range shot over and over. Still, I don't want to oversimplify things here. Kobe's incredible shot making and ability to utilize it out of pick and roll or isolation or the post, when paired with his great off-ball scoring, made him an extremely versatile scorer who could stress a defense from all over the floor and still demanded loads of defensive attention. So he was a great offensive engine. It's just, he wasn't one of the tier 1 guys in NBA history, and his greatest ability was not the most valuable, while many basketball fans treat it as such. And it's the overvaluing of that very aesthetically pleasing skill set that is the key reason some fans will argue Kobe was the far better scorer than LeBron, which is in turn the reason fans will argue Kobe was the better player than LeBron, even as regular season and playoff scoring volume and efficiency, and even the all-important clutch numbers say otherwise, and LeBron's far superior playmaking, rebounding, and defense make him unquestionably the more impactful player. The reality is that an unjustifiable basketball opinion, such as Kobe was better than LeBron or Kyrie is better than Chris Paul, is inherently dependent on some irrational component. You have to, in some way, shift the conversation away from actual impact on the court, usually by creating a myth. Our hero inspired the most fear in opponents, or he was the most skilled, or he was the most clutch, even if reality contradicts that. But the reason one makes all of these decidedly ambiguous claims is the same. It all boils down to the fact that they like the player more. We are basketball fans, and you're not going to believe this, but that's short for fanatic. Rationality is not often abundant in sports discourse. We are driven by our personal biases, and it's easy to become so deeply enamored with Kobe's fadeaway or Kyrie's handle that objective reality ceases to exist. You like him the most, so you want him to be the best, and you'll work backwards from that point to make whatever haphazard, distorted argument necessary to try to justify it. Again here, we wander into the muddied waters between art and science. Basketball is a beautiful game. Fundamentally, that is why we all love it so much. It is a joy to watch, and the NBA is also an entertainment product. So it should go without saying that everyone is entitled to enjoy whoever's game speaks to them. And I'm certainly not trying to instate a basketball dictatorship under which we turn all discourse about the sport into a soulless science. That would suck. But the unfortunate reality is that we rarely talk about basketball in terms of enjoyment. Almost always, we insist upon discussing players only in terms of how good they are. Everybody under the sun has put together a list of their top 10 players at some point, but it's rarer for someone to list their 10 favorite players. Those are two very different things, both interesting in their own distinct ways, yet they're incredibly hard to fully separate for many, so the fan favorites tend to get overrated. I have seen some nauseatingly bad takes propping up White Chocolate or Jay Crossover, both of whom were thoroughly mediocre NBA players with thoroughly riveting highlight tapes. And of course, there is nothing wrong with enjoying those guys as players. It makes sense to. But I like him more than X is a very different claim than he is better than X. Yet they are very often conflated. I think we'd be much better off if we could clearly draw that line between the two, to have one conversation about enjoyment and another completely detached one about value. I don't know if that's really possible. At least not universally. And of course, certain biases are always going to be super prevalent in sports. Like, diehard fans are always going to overrate players from their favorite teams. That's fine, that's natural, that's sports. We all understand that. But the aesthetics bias is more subtle and yet still very pervasive in basketball. So, as things stand, personal aesthetic preferences often get in the way of clear and honest conversations about that impact. And especially with today's rabid stan culture, that creates an army of soldiers willing to use any method necessary to prop up, for example, Kyrie, and leaves a similarly great player like Draymond Green an extremely impactful, unique basketball genius, one of the handful of greatest defenders ever, whose complementary playmaking has also provided an underrated boost to Steph's offense, who just happens to shoot like he has a backpack on, slandered and disparaged by a huge portion of NBA fans. And I think that's a shame, not just because I want everybody to be able to understand and acknowledge how good Draymond is, but because I also wish we could all appreciate and enjoy it and understand that beauty does take many forms on the basketball court. And watching Draymond fly around as a backline defender with superhuman anticipation or surgically dissect a 4-on-3 off the short roll is also poetry in motion, just like a nasty Kyrie dribble combination into a step back. It's different, but it's still excellence in the same awesome sport. And I've focused on a couple of defensive players being underappreciated because of this aesthetics bias, and they are most often the victims of it. But an offensive genius like Tyrese Halliburton was long badly underrated, in part because the box score didn't capture his full unique impact, but also because people don't like watching the mechanics of his jump shot or his handle, even though both are very effective. And with his pace-pushing, brilliant playmaking, incredible offensive IQ, and general selfless approach to optimize team offense, I find him an absolute joy to watch. But I'm not making this video to try to tell anybody what they have to like, and I'm not making this video to alienate That Boy Nice watchers or pure Hooper enjoyers. And we all can and should appreciate the mastery of the skill that comes with a player who has a sick bag, but often we value that too much compared to everything else. And I do think the overrating of one almost always comes at the expense of another. And I just want to ensure that all great players in this great game are properly respected, understood, and valued, so we can appreciate both the art and the science of the sport all at once.